The Game Schooler podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Bomb Busters, our game of the week, discuss punching and playing in the school of gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five games from Hachette Board Games. Welcome to the Game Schooler podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
What's going on, Doug? How are you?
I am pretty good. Yeah. I don't know. Good. How about you?
Yeah. No, life's good, man. Life's really good. Got some good games played with you and our buddy Dan last night. I always feel rejuvenated the day after.
Some news, some classics.
Yeah, some new to me, which is all fun. I also have some awesome things to share. Can I just jump right in? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not hijacking your segment. Did you have some follow-up?
I do have some follow-up.
You do follow-up, then I'll share what's awesome.
So every once in a while, we've got to kind of move our recording schedule around in order to fit things in. So we record some episodes ahead of time and kind of out of the loop, but there has been quite the discussion on the Discord about my proclamation of 24 games being kind of an ideal collection.
You got blasted, Doug. I love it. You got
blasted.
Blasted. Keep going.
I don't care about that. That doesn't bother me whatsoever. I still stand by that. I think 24 games representative of different genres, cycling in and out would be great. The thing that I do want to follow up with, though, is in watching that discussion because everybody had their own opinions, right? And I just want to clarify that I don't have 24 games in my collection. And the size of the collection is kind of irrelevant to the discussion. We're not talking about a point of this is the ideal collection, or if you have more than that, you're wasting, or if you have that, you're awesome. And so I want to kind of put that out there that there's no judgment on what kind of game collection you have. Everybody's got their own reasons, justifications, and the things that they want to have in their collection. And I think for us, that discussion is a personal one of you and I noticing things changing in our lives and in our collection and kind of guiding, letting people in on that journey. Because
Absolutely.
My thoughts on a collection have changed from when I started to what they were 5 years ago to what they are now. And that's constantly changing and evolving based on seasons in life, what games I have access to, and things like that. So I don't want it to be misconstrued that if you have a large collection or you like collecting games, that we're, I think, anything less or that there's a problem with that. It's more of behind the curtain what we're struggling with as gamers right now.
Well, and our viewpoint of the hobby has forever changed because of this podcast.
Yes.
The comment that I thought that was really interesting on the Discord was when Anitra, who is a co-host of the Family Gamers podcast, great podcast, check them out. They've been doing it longer than we have. Andrew and Anitra, our husband and wife out on the East Coast of the United States, do a really good job and have a ton of reviews. They play a ton of games, but made a comment that she could get down to 100, and then that doesn't include review copies. So,
yeah.
And that's where before the podcast started, and then where the podcast is now, and it's tough to separate those two things for me, and I'm sure it is for you as well.
Sure.
And I don't want to speak for you, but if the podcast went away, I think 24 is an absolute really good number. But then when you get into what's left out, what's on your 25th, what's on your 26th, that's
Yeah.
That's a conversation for people in the hobby to have. And so really good reaction, though, over there, right?
Yeah.
You had a hot take, Doug, as people in the industry would say.
Yeah, well, and I think that anytime you try and put absolutes on something, you're going to catch flack on things. It's like, do I think that 24 games is a good collection for everybody? Do I think I could do a 24 game collection? No, that's almost like,
well, I'm going to give you
optimal.
some credit here, Doug. You're walking the walk. I'm going to give you some credit. Okay. I walked into your house last night, sat down for a game night, essentially, and I could feel like, whoa, there's some space. And they weren't holes in the calyx or on the shelves. There was space on the shelves. And so at the end of the night, it's like 11:30 at night. Doug probably just wants us to get out of his house. Maybe it was 10:30. I don't know. But the time, stops. Time stands still at the end of a 4-hour game night. I said, well, you mind if I see what you're getting rid of, what's in the boxes? And I'm thinking, because I just did a recent cull, too.
Yeah.
I want to let you know. I have some gaps and holes after ranking my games. And I have a pile of games that fit into a small box. And folks, on Doug's floor were 3 boxes of games, and then on the shelf were another set of games to be, to move on from. I'm like, holy cow, Doug, you did some deep cuts.
Yeah.
So you're walking your walk. I am walking a different walk. I'm walking my own walk, not that walk.
Which everybody should. The other thing, too, is that the idea of culling and reducing your collection does not expunge those games from existence. So you can potentially, if you're missing them, and of course, caveats to everything, you could reacquire a game if you missed it that bad, or you could play it at a convention, or maybe a friend has it. There's other ways
to
get
online.
Yeah, there's a whole slew of games. So just because a game isn't in your collection doesn't mean you don't have access it or can never play it again, which is one of the filters that I'm using, which is, okay, do I need to have this on my shelf on the off chance that I may want to play it, or can I move on from it, and maybe if I get the urge to play it, I'll play it down the line, Yeah. So, but that leads into what's awesome in gaming for me is that Discord has some really cool discussions that happen after our School of Gaming and our high fives and things like that. So if you enjoy what we talk about on the show, head over to the Discord, because there are folks talking about those same topics with grace and civility in a way that is not commonly found online. So check that out, gameschooler.com/Discord, for an awesome community to have discussions like this without snark and condescension getting in the way. So I really appreciate that, and I think it's an awesome space in the hobby.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. My what's awesome with gaming this week is a little bit more specific and very recent. In episode 110, all the way back. So I'm going to shout out some episode numbers so that people who are newer to the podcast can go back and listen. But really, I think, we're 4 or 5 years into this journey now. We've been fortunate to interview a lot of different people and have some fun conversations in the School of Gaming segment. And one of those came in episode 110, where we interviewed Dan Cunningham. And 2 years ago, March 2023, he talked about the ins and outs of inserts and how that's changing in the hobby.
Yeah.
And then in episode 191, we brought him back to talk about the ever-changing world of inserts. And, not only is Dan a board game designer with that credential on his Board Game Geek, but he's now a world-famous designer of inserts, such as the Battle Chest to hold all things Dead Reckoning from John D. Clare and AEG, and he's also a friend of ours. Well, I got to share something out, Doug, and this might surprise you, but I play it because I haven't disclosed every single game that's come into my collection, but I'm about to do that live on the air
disappointed.
Here.
Yeah, I feel like I should get we should make an app for that. Every time you acquire a new game, I get a ping or something.
I can do that for you. It's called iMessage. I'll just send you a picture. I played a demo of a game called Emerald Skulls, and a game that's designed by Steven Dast and published from Thunderworks Games. And at our local regional convention, Thunderworks has a demo of all their games, and I got to play the demo by the designer. And that was shortly after we had interviewed Keith Matejka from Thunderworks and a guy named Stephen Kerr from Thunderworks. And, I asked Keith, what's the best and most under-the-radar game he's ever published? And Keith, being the salesman that he is, said a game that he designed called Goblin Vaults. And oh, by the way, don't you know that there's this thing called the Swindler's Chest that will include Goblin Vaults and Emerald Skulls, and the insert is designed by one and only Dan Cunningham. I was like, okay, you got me. You got me. So it arrived yesterday, and Doug, I got to tell you, this thing is a modern marvel. I don't know how Dan and Keith got 2 games in. I got some props here, so I'll have to just watch my mic and let you know, but you get off the run sheet here. Like, the components stack in a way that it gets right out onto the table for multiple games, and it's incredible. The playmat is 2-sided. It unrolls and fits in there a la Challengers or Flamecraft, but for either game. And I right away, when I unboxed it, possibly last night when I got home from game night, or possibly very early this morning, I emailed Keith Matejka, and I said, hey, you're going to see Doug at Gamma next week. This game is incredibly well put together. But just how everything fits together, and I was in awe. Yeah. And then to be like a guy, that's how small the hobby is too, right? Like, you have the same few people that are just working at their craft over time, and they're getting better. And because they're getting better at the engineering side and the production side, you see how things fit together. And so I just needed to give Dan a shout out, because we give him a hard time in person. But if you want to hear more about the inserts, and he was also on Ludology recently as well, talking about all things inserts. Sure. Go check out those interviews. I think we did a pretty darn good job, especially in the 191. It was 2 episodes after Dr. Reiner Knizia, so we were fresh on the interview kick. But I'm not doing it really justice on an audio podcast of how things fit together, but it's impressive. Doug, I was expecting like a big old box, right? The Swindler's Chest. And when I saw it last night, I was it's not that I was disappointed, but I was like, I thought there's going to be more stuff than that little box. And then I opened it up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is in this box. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, no, that's something that's definitely awesome when you get there's a difference between having a game with a great insert that you can just are ready to play right away, as opposed to a game that you have to put 8,000 baggies in just to try and make it somewhat organized on your own. So it is one of the awesome parts of the hobby that has popped up over the last couple of years, that's for sure.
Well, and the fact that we have somebody in our game group who's a part of it, but then when we see him nerd out and it looks like he's smelling what he is unboxing and putting back together, but he's seeing how things fit down to the millimeter. So just wanted to share that out. It was pretty cool.
Awesome. Cool. All right. This week, our spotlight is Books of Time from
Just
Board
shifting
Dice.
my props here, Doug. Apologies. Okay. Just getting one game into the next.
Published in 2023. The designer, rough.
Designer is Philippe Glowatz.
Yep.
And published by Board and Dice. Back to you, Doug.
Okay. I won't attempt the artist, because I feel like Alexander Zawada I can do. The other one I'm unfortunately unable to. Zbigniew Gelter. 1 to 4 players, 60 minutes, 14 plus on the box, 10 plus on Board Game Geek.
14 plus
can't
on
see
the
that happening.
Game Schooler podcast for reasons we'll get into.
Books of Time puts a unique and exciting twist on tableau building, allowing you to construct 3 great books, each with their own sets of special abilities that you can write, thereby creating incredible combinations. The story of civilization is now truly at your fingertips. 3 types of pages go into player books, trade, science, and industry. During the game, you add pages to these books to create powerful combinations of actions that you can activate. You need to efficiently manage your resources to create the books that will meet your personal objectives and score you the most points. And I will point out that those miniature books have little 3-ring binder posts in them that you are snapping and putting the new pages in. So it's not just you're flipping different cards over. You're actually putting the cards into the three individual books. Take it away, Michael.
Yeah, that's me in the background, just snapping my binder clips. And as Doug did a wonderful description, I thought I had to do all that today. So I appreciate Doug being so prepared and organized and brilliant there. The production's beautiful. All right. And the 3 different books that you have, the trade, science, and industry tracks that you're moving up, what I think the game does really well in the solo environment is that it's fun to try to move up those tracks as you're facing Scribbles, who is blocking off different pathways. And the board in the solo game changes very rapidly. So if you are new into the solo sphere, or if you're like, I want to try a little bit of a heavier solo, I think Books of Time, you could tell there was a lot of time and care and attention put into the solo version of it. And that takes me into the multiplayer is very much similar, except the board isn't turning over as rapidly. It is very much a multiplayer solo game with not a ton of interaction amongst players, which I know some game groups are going to like. There are game groups out there who that's what they want to do, where everybody is kind of sharing out loud or silently. I'm going to spend this pen and this paper to get those points. I'm going to convert these 2 pens to these 3 papers, which is going to allow me to move up this track. Most points wins at the end. It's a game that I've really enjoyed playing when I was allowed to leave it set up on my table and play it for 3 or 4 times to try to get a little bit better. So I think what you're hearing in this spotlight, it's not going to work for everybody because I don't think this is a very family-centric game. Yeah. I think this is a game for game groups that like to play mid to heavier Euros, which they probably consider lightweight. Yeah. But it's for gamers, and it really is that 14 plus. That's the one thing that I want to say. I could not play this with my 9-year-old Doug. I tried. Yeah. And I tried right when she had turned 9, and we were playing a lot of games at that time, and she helped me to put it together and to punch it and to get it into bags. This was a review copy. Grateful for Board and Dice to send it, and when we get a review copy, it's kind of a big deal in the house where people like to see what it is and punch it out. It's got these binder clips. I'm saying don't lose a finger or a fingernail, preferably not a finger on the clips because the clips are heavy-duty binders. But there's one too many steps, one too many procedures for it to be accessible at that 10-year-old level. I would stand by that. I think it's because of the phases and just how procedural the game is. This is a light hobby game for adults or older teenagers.
Yeah, I think I think when you go online, some of the folks on there, you can tell that they're more geared towards the hobby level because although some of the mechanisms and maybe what you do on your turn isn't overly complicated, there is a lot going on. This one didn't work for me. I loved seeing it on the table. I was very interested walking by, and the idea of putting pages into a book seemed really intriguing to me on a civilization style theme. However, I wanted more theme. I wanted more interaction. And unfortunately for me, I felt like the turns were not very exciting. I felt like this was a very work-like game as opposed to, oh, wow, I just did a really cool combo. It felt more like I'm working really hard to not fire off a whole bunch of... It's like, here's all the cool things that you can do, but they're really hard to do, which I think makes it great for a solo game, or... if you are in the groups that, like, if you like playing games without a bunch of interaction and you like spending that time together and just really crunching it out and really figuring out what those avenues are to be super efficient, I think it'll work really well for you. That's not one that I want to keep revisiting to that level to get that mastery at it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're highlighting it. You also had the unfortunate experience of me coming off about 3 solo plays of it. So even though I was trying to help and nerf it a little bit, I was taking actions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you ran into a game where things weren't coming out for you right. For those who are watching
But neither
on
of us
YouTube,
made it up those tracks very high.
No. I've never made it up multiple tracks in a game. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's part of the design. Those who are watching on YouTube, you got this nice little podium. A lot of the production reminded me of like a Gutenberg, just where the cardboard pieces and the art are put together in a way that's really nice. You know, the iconography on the cards with the procedures and steps is very clearly outlined. It's just there's a lot of it, you know, and that's where I don't think, you know, those 10-year-old kiddos are going to. I don't get that on BGG sometimes, where it's, you know, it is 14 plus, I think. The last thing that I just want to mention, and this is why it is a spotlight for me, and I think this is a good spot for us to really mention the spotlight. You know, I saw people playing it at a convention, and I asked the guy, I said, well, what do you think of it? And he's like, oh, I like it, but I know one guy in my group's not going to like it. You know, and kind of just, he talked about why he liked it. And I said, you know, I really enjoyed playing Scribbles. And so that's the name of the solo bot. And like right away, he and I had a connection. And you could just see like the game recognized game. Like he's eyeballing me, I'm eyeballing him. 2 people that play solo games, play Euro games and have fun.
Yeah.
But we're also at a point in our spotlight where I didn't think this was going to work for you, Doug. And I think that's okay. You know, that's why we have a spotlight segment, to just say who it works for, who it doesn't. And going forward, we may have some spotlight games where one of us has played and the other one hasn't, because we just know. We just know if it is or isn't going to work. So that's Books of Time. We appreciate it.
Well,
There's some.
This is also the game that led Michael down a shame spiral of feeling bad that we actually played it, because was that the one that you were like, we should, like, I don't think this is going to work for you, but it's like, all right, we'll give it a try. And then you're like, gosh, I shouldn't have done this because I knew it wasn't going to work for you. But you never know, you know, and there's a 50% chance it's like, it could have been awesome.
Or a 12.5% chance, and I'll still take that chance a lot of times, as people know. Give me 1 out of 8 odds. I'll shoot that shot.
Yeah. So that is our spotlight this week. Games of Time, Books of Time from Board and Dice. Before we move on to the game of the week, just want to remind everybody about the Discord again. Check that out, gameschooler.com/Discord. Spread the word about the podcast if you like what we're doing.
I just had to log out of because it was chiming in.
Beeping,
I don't know if you were hearing those notifications, but that was
Very
our Discord
minimally.
going wild.
And then contact us, reach out if you got questions or comments, email at gameschooler.com. We would love to hear from you. Now, let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Bomb Busters. Doug, give us the stats.
All right, published in 2024 by Pegasus Spiel. It was a surprise show up at Gen Con 2024. The designer is Hisashi Hayashi, and the art is by Dominique Furland. 2 to 5 players, 30 minutes. This one is going to be a 10-plus game. It's going to be a family-weight game. In Bomb Busters, you are a group of bomb diffusers. You are trying to defuse bombs, and there is a set of 48 normal wires numbered 1 to 12, and there is going to be 4 values, 4 of each value. So there are going to be 4 2s. There are going to be 4 6s. Then you add some, potentially, depending on, this game has a bunch of scenarios that you kind of work up through, tutorials, things like that. Eventually you'll add yellow and red wires and deal those out. You're going to deal them all out equally to the players. Each mission is different, but your goal is always the same. Go through all 12 numbers without blowing up. You're going to place your wire tiles on stands in front of you, and then you're going to take turns pointing at each other's wires and guessing their values. If the guess is correct, the wires are cut. If not, the detonator advances. If you manage to cut all of the wires without blowing up, good job, the mission is completed. But if the bomb goes off, you're going to have to try again. The start of the game, you're going to put out just a little bit of information pointing to one of the wires in front of you that says maybe this is a 5. And every player is going to do that. And then on your turn, you can either do one of two things. You can do a regular cut, which is, I would say, point to Michael's stand and say, that is a 6. If I'm right, he says it's a 6, and then I will take a 6 out of my tray and cut the 6 wire. You can also do a solo cut, which is if I happen to have all 5 threes, or all 4 threes, sorry, I could just say I'm going to solo cut all of these 3s because I have them all. Or if I have the 2 remaining 3s because we've already cut the other 3s, I could then cut those by myself. As the game goes along, as you get more complicated things, you're introducing the red and yellow wires. There's also special abilities that you can unlock that help you do things as the game gets more and more complicated. But that's kind of the basic thing. There are 66 different scenarios. And
tell us about all of them, Doug.
Yes. Okay. So scenario 57 is going to add.
You can't.
No. The first 10 scenarios that are available to you right out of the box are getting you up and running, playing the entire game. And me personally, like, that is enough game. Like, you don't
That's
even
Doug's
need.
biggest complaint about the game, folks, offline was, I'm never going to use all these scenarios. He went
There's
full
too
Andy
much
Rooney,
content.
for those of you old enough to know who Andy Rooney on 60 Minutes is. I'm never going to use all of these. I'm upset that they made so much of an awesome game.
I'm not upset about it. I'm just saying.
I'm messing with you, man.
The game is so good that I will never even need to go that far.
Yeah, and we didn't go that far because of my colorblindness with some things, but I didn't really have an issue with it, you know. And how many of the scenarios did we play?
I think we got through 5 or 6, maybe.
Yeah, and
we got up to where it was teaching you pretty much the full game.
And I wanted to keep playing. And we were 90 minutes in and had a stack of other games. And, well, could we just do one more scenario? Can we just keep there?
Yeah.
There is a hook to that game that just keeps you wanting to solve the puzzles.
Yeah, I think what I really like about this game, and it's a type of game that I've been searching for a long time, which is a game that functions on logic and deduction, but also has the thematic tension.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's similar to a game where there's a game called Hanabi, very popular game, that you are setting off fireworks and you have a hand that you can't see, everybody else can see, and you're trying to figure out, you want to lay one of your cards down in order to make these fireworks go off. In that game, it has the tension part, right? Of, I hope this is right. So it has that part. But the thing I don't like about Hanabi is that there are parts in the game where I feel like I'm the dummy. Like, I don't know what is going on, and everybody else seems to have that at the table. In this game, it has that similar tension of, like, I hope this is a 5, because if it's not, we're blowing up. It has that, which is great in a bomb theme. But there's also, I can see everything that's in front of me. So it's like I have some control of my information. And when you fill up your trays, you're filling them up in numerical order, which gives you clues about, all right, well, I've got these, 2 5s, and Michael just cut this. So there is the logic of figuring it out that I think is obtainable, where sometimes there's logic in a game or deduction in a game, and it's like, yeah, you really have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to that level. This one, I felt like, oh, yeah, you can kind of mathematically figure it out. Like, oh, then that has to be a 2 because it wouldn't jump all the way. Those type of things that I really love that mixture.
In those first 5 games, the logic still brings it down to a 50% choice, right? At worst, a 1 out of 3. And so you can stand by your guess. And I know you just said that, but I'm kind of restating it because I also liked that as well. When we had a fail and you were like, well, you really should. I said, yeah, I know, but I didn't see it. Now I see it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was still not a 100% chance. There's still that chance on one or two of those, and when you're wrong, you move the dial. You're getting one step closer to exploding.
Yeah, and the red wires. If you basically the yellow wires sit in between other wires. There's no necessarily number attached to them. It's just where they sit in the order. So they kind of throw things off because there's like a 0.1 after them. So you might have a 7, then a yellow 7.1, and then 3/8. And people aren't sure necessarily. It's like, is that another 7? Is that an 8? That type of thing. And when you're cutting yellow wire, you just say, is that a yellow wire? If it's a yellow wire, great. You cut both yellow wires. The red wires, you can't cut at all. And if you cut a red wire, you blow up. So there is that, similar to a thing like Codenames with the assassin or the spy or whatever. That's like, yeah, that's the one place you couldn't do. So it's like it has that instant blow up factor. It has that thing that I'm pretty confident this is a 2, so I'm going to point at it. But it's not. Like, all of those things work so well. And I think what I really like about this game is, A, it's a good cooperative game to teach something that we don't really, outside of patience, which I have as a skill in this game, is this is a good cooperative game to teach grace and accept people trying their best. Because you could play this game and be like, Michael, you idiot, of course this was a 4, and this is why you should have known it, and that type of thing.
I'm trying my best, Doug, okay? I'm trying over here.
Well, try harder, Michael. But
that's always what you want to tell children, right?
Yeah,
when children are doing their best, tell them to just try harder.
Yeah. Slow
Great
down.
Moments of coaching.
Do better. But this game has that opportunity, and I can see my kids playing this game and provide, one sister getting mad at the other sister because she blew us up, and being in a position to be like, no, this is a good opportunity. Like, we're all trying our best. Let's run it back again, and we don't need to be knocking people down that way. And so the fact that this game provides those teachable moments, I think, is cool. It is also something to be aware of, that it could crop up in a game like this, where one kid is super invested into the theme and doing it, and another kid is maybe a little bit more blasé about it and blows it up.
Oh, there's no could be about it. You got to watch out for siblings with bomb busters. This is where older and younger and older can brawl. I do that.
So it's a be aware of, but also an awesome. Not many. A game providing that opportunity to have that teachable moment is also cool about it as well.
Yeah, I have a few if this then that. Like, if you like this game, if you listen to this review, then you will very likely enjoy Bomb Busters. And so if you've been along the journey with us, and a game that I've recently talked about is Zombie Kids Evolution from Scorpion Mask, right? Like, it's a game that I've played with all 3 of my kids. We're just coming to completion after about 4 years. Like, Bomb Busters is a level up from the cooperative standpoint and provides something slightly differently, but you have a similar level of conversation after the fact.
Yeah.
After you make that decision about, was this a 6, was this a 2, with your 2 choices, where you get to, kind of look at each other and have that moment of, oh, well, here's why I did what I did. Oh, yeah, well, good choice. Well, we got to keep going, keep moving. There's just a great group discussion that happens that I think is really good at 2 players, and one that I want to play this game with my kiddos. I haven't played it yet, but I with my children, but I'd like to try, with teenager and their friends, watch them play it. I don't know if they let me play it at the table or not. And then, okay, 9-year-old, we're going to play this. Yep, let's go. Which one are we on? And kind of keeping track of which puzzle you're going through. Very different game from what I was expecting from a designer that I really enjoy. A designer who we've covered in the past, and I've got a lot of his games sitting on my shelf.
Well, last week I believe I talked about just the idea of being a little bit burnt out on cooperative games recently, and just feeling like they're falling into the same trap. And this one is very different. I mean, it has some connective tissue to something like Hanabi and some other kind of guessing games, but it felt well thought out, well developed, a good marriage of mechanisms and themes working together that I really appreciated it. And you mentioned the group discussion is in this game, which I love that, because everybody's kind of has their own kind of code and logic of the way that they're processing what's out there, and you can have that after game discussion. It was like, I was thinking this, because there is some strategy and things that are involved in what information I'm giving you, which is also based on the information that I know. So it's like, if I only have one of a number, but I've got, and in a 2-player game for sure, I know that Michael's got all the rest of them. So it's important for him to know where that number is, and or even thinking about, where can I put this so he'll know that there's a bigger gap here in numbers. So there's all of that little information that goes in before you even actually start playing the game that is really cool. There's cooperation. There's observation.
Observation is huge with the context clues. Being able to see and deduce and provide, right? Provide those clues as well.
And then problem solving, figuring out where you need to go and when. And I do, Michael mentioned that at the top about that there's so much content in this box. And it's like, I have that as a thing that I like, is that there's more game in this box that you could possibly ever need. So if you love this game, you can stay with this game for a really long time. And the way that those tiles are shuffled out and the wires are handed out, every game is going to be completely different of how you need to attack some of those things.
And one thing that we haven't said yet that I just want to highlight, and it might sound odd, but typically in a game that has a clock on the cover, right? It has a digital clock on the game art of the box, and you're trying to make sure a bomb doesn't go off. It doesn't have that real-time timer that I think can go wrong. So the game still provides wonderful tension.
Yep.
Without using a timer. And I thought that was interesting, that your timer is your bad decisions. So don't make bad decisions, and you'll have more time.
So great marriage between theme, mechanisms, and providing the like you said, that tension, and just really impressed with this game and the amount of stuff that's in the box. I think Pegasus Spiel has got a great game on their hands, and I know that a lot of people have really enjoyed this one in the reviewing community. So check that out. That's our game of the week, Bomb Busters from Pegasus Spiel.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we discuss going from punching to playing.
Yeah, I was recently punching out a board game that I had gotten, and sitting at the table and just getting it all set up and bagged and putting it away. And it occurred to me that I rarely, if ever, am like taking a game from shrink wrap to let's play this right now. Hardly ever. Like that, I don't even know if I could think of that unless it happened to be something that I already knew the rules to, something like What the Cup or a thing like that. But any sort of, square Ticket to Ride style box, get it, punch it, spend some time with the rule book, and get ready to teach it. And it occurred to me that it's like, there are a lot of people that don't do that. They literally just buy a game from Target, and then everybody sits down and says, all right, we're going to play this game. And the pros and cons of that, because it's kind of foreign to me to even think about doing that. So I thought, well, let's talk about what the pros and cons are. Is that something that you've ever done, or?
I do it often with my family.
Yeah.
If I have a game that either we've seen a demo of, or if it's I don't want to say a special game day, but if it's my birthday, holiday, it's like, okay, this is the game we're going to play. I'll take over the table, get it all set up, take about an hour to learn the rules, and then call everybody over to the table. And as I'm going through that, it's almost a ritual. I used to do a lot more early in the podcast when I was trying to make little reviewers, but it probably is about 2 to 3 times a year. I'll do the full punch out and play. It's a lot more common for card games more recently.
Sure.
The most recent example I can think of is a game now that is like a small card game, dead simple rules. I'm just going to get this up. But in terms of what you're talking about with larger game, 100+ components, very, very rare. 2 to 3 times a year, get a Ticket to Ride type size box and game out, up and running, but no more than that.
Yeah, I think it ultimately depends on your game group and who you're playing with, because I think there could be some pros of the idea of, if everybody's sitting at and I think to me it's even your idea of, I'm going to punch this over here and get it all set up by myself and then call everybody over, compared to the difference of, all right, everybody come over and then we're going to play this game. It's almost like you've already got the buy-in from people right up front. It's like, yeah, you can get help punching stuff. So it's like that whole process is going a lot of faster. I imagine some people may enjoy the cooperative nature of learning a game kind of together at the table, and don't mind the idea of like, all right, I'm going to read through the rules and we're going to kind of go through this together and learn it together. I can see some advantages to that, and certainly the idea of like, we're getting to the table now is a pro. Now, whether getting it to the table now is offsetting a poor experience, which is then defeating the purpose of the game, is a whole other avenue that you could go down, right?
Yeah, and I think I've observed this 2 different times over the last year. When we were at Gen Con and playing in Lucas Oil Stadium, I watched, I'm assuming Father with his 2 sons just come in, and they each divided a game, right? He had War of the Ring, the card game, and they each had another game, and they were essentially doing the punching and playing. One of them, the game was new right out of the library, and they were punching, learning the rules, and you could tell like that's how they spend their day. That must be the norm, what they do in their house. Yeah, I was also at a game day meetup and very much watched a group do it with an all play game, things with rings. Just open it up, and you could tell like, that's the person who sets up the game. That's the person who's going to teach the game. And this is the person who's just emptying the bags. Like, they had their specific roles. They weren't in somebody's house. They were meeting up in a church, and they had their defined roles and routine and kind of a ritual. And I don't, that's just not how we get things up and running for the podcast or in our game group, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as far as the con approach of that is that there's going to be a lot of rule checking, and you don't get the benefit of having,
or missing, just straight rule missing.
Well, there you go too. And there is no what I would call like a resident expert to answer simple questions. Like the amount of times that you and I are playing a game, and it's a game that one of us is new on, the other one knows, and it's a thing of like, well, what do I do with this? And it's like, a lot of times that question can get answered really quickly without looking in the rule book, and there's an advantage to that. And once you start going back and forth between rule book and, in your case, missing a rule or playing halfway through a round and be like, something doesn't seem right here, it breaks a lot of the flow of the game. And so I'm curious, because it's like I could see the advantage, but I wonder if this is a pitfall that a lot of new gamers or the casual gamers fall into, is that idea of like, oh, well, you just buy a game from Target, you bring it home. Hey, let's play that game that we just bought. And everybody sits at the table and you have one person fumbling with the rules and it's like, oh, well, we got to get this set up. And how many players do we have? And, oh, no, we don't need those. And you're not familiar with what components are. And some rule books go into where it's like, take out the 4 contract cards. It's like, what are the contract cards? I need to find those.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if sometimes that can lead to a poor experience that then doesn't bring those 4 people or 3 people back to the table and be like, games just really aren't for us, and kind of put their hands up. And it's like, that's just not a great experience. And I wonder if it just comes from not being familiar with the idea of like, no, in my world, I get a game, I unbox it. A lot of times I will kind of organize it as best as I can, setup wise. Not on the table, but just like, all right, these all go in a bag or these go into this section.
In your brain. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. I'll bag it up and kind of tidy it up and put it in the box. And then I take the rule book and I read the rule book without even looking at the other components somewhere else. Like I'll have a stack of 2 or 3 rule books, go sit down in a chair, read through them and just kind of absorb them. And then game night comes and I'm teaching them, and there's kind of a general flow of somebody already knows the game and we're up and running. And if it's a great day, I can get the game set up on the table ready to go. So when people come, it's like straight into the teach as opposed to putting everything up. And it's like, it seems to work well. I'm not on the receiving end of that, but
no, it works great. I just don't think it's that normal. And I think that is extreme high performance, and like, and this is something that really prompted this topic. The more that we do the show, how much removed are we from how others experience a hobby and play games? Yeah. How common is it for people to just grab a game from Target, punch it, and play it? If you're getting Wingspan or Everdell and just really march through the game. And I don't know. I'd love to hear where others are at, because I think it's what you do is awesome. It works for you. It works for our game group. It works for our show. Is that the norm? Is that what the person who is running their game night or the hobbyist, is that what they do? Do they sift through the rule books and do exactly what you did? What I've noticed in some of the Kickstarter, the bigger, the hobbier, the greater than $100 games, that initial setup is very deliberate and thought out.
Yeah.
And that punch out is often being done by somebody else. Sometimes the components are actually dropped into a custom tray for you, so you don't have to go through the punch out and the sorting. Or there's a tutorial that tells you do this, then this, then that, then this, then this. Okay, now you're ready to play. And it seems like some of that punch out phase is actually starting to get more automated or done by somebody else before it actually gets to your house in some instances, which is really odd too if you just step back and think about it.
Yeah. I think my biggest fear is that people are missing out on the joys of playing games because they're not aware of that hindering their experience and getting in the way of, you think about the number of like, oh, if I buy a book, you just put the book on the shelf, and when you want to read it, you start reading it. If you buy a movie, you buy it, you take it out of the package, you put it in your DVD player, or at one point you did, and you watch the movie. Even a video game you download, and they're teaching you the game as you start playing, and you can kind of like, you can get a game of Madden on your PS5 and fumble through it and still have an okay experience of like, oh, I guess that button doesn't do what I thought it did.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you can't do that with a board game. You can't just say, oh, I guess I don't get 8 coins every turn. Like, you can't just, there's nothing telling you what you can and can't do except for the person that read the rules. And my fear is that because it's a different medium than people are used to consuming, they think that you can just kind of jump into it. And my nightmare scenario is what you described. Somebody goes to Target, buys Wingspan or Everdell, sits down with 4 people, think that they're going to learn the game, punch the game, get it all set up, and
have an enjoyable, cozy night.
Yeah, and then that experience is going to be great, which I think my brother did that one time with Small World, and he's like, is the game supposed to take 3 hours? And it's like, no, it's a 45-minute to an hour game. Like, what did you do? Like, I couldn't even fathom how you could stretch the game out. And it's like, they might have had a rule wrong. They were doing, like, they did that.
There might have been kids running around in the background. There could have been a game on TV. Yeah.
So I'm just curious of, like, and I don't know that there's a solution to it. It's like you can't put on the side of the box, hey, if you're the one buying this game and you're playing with non-gamers and you're kind of a non-gamer yourself, take the time to punch everything out and read the rules before you teach it to other people. Like, there is no good solution to that, but I imagine there's a lot of that going on, and I think also contributes to when gamers complain about why are there so many party games and simple games at Target and Walmart is because,
oh my gosh,
that's what people go to Walmart and Target and buy, and that's the way they approach gaming, not the way that people and I, or you and I approach gaming and people in the hobby.
Doug, when I get a trade or pick up a used game from Noble Knight, and when I open it up, and my first sense is a feeling of relief and joy because somebody else has already punched out and organized the game for me, and they clearly are tidy and organized and did it in a way that just saved me 90 minutes of work. That's kind of where I am at right now. That's not really normal.
Correct.
So I do think it, and what we've touched on and talked about, it is a barrier of entry that keeps people out of the hobby. And at the same time, if you're going to a convention and there is a library and some of that work's already been done and there's tutorials and guides that are printed out and in there, it is also really nice. When somebody's done that punching out and sorting and has found a way to teach the game to people, that's a benefit that can lower that barrier.
Yeah. So let us know in the Discord, how you guys approach punching and playing a game. And if you are doing this in one setting, let us know how it goes or what you do to make it better or things like that. I'd love to hear more.
Tactics, process.
More information on this to see if we're outliers or we're part of the norm or how that works. So go to thegameschooler.com/Discord and join the conversation about that. Now let's move on to the high five. Every week, Michael and I highlight a list of games we want to play, enjoy, or spread the word about. And everyone loves lists. And this week, we've got a kind of an interesting one. We're going to be doing the high five games from Hachette Games, which is kind of interesting because Hachette is kind of a overarching publisher that has a lot of smaller studios and publishers that feed into it. And sometimes those publishers are changing and, a studio that may be with them now is not with them 2 years from now and vice versa. So it's kind of an interesting list on that front because all of the publishers on the 5 games on my list all are from a different studio, but are all under the Hachette umbrella, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, and I'm glad that you said that out loud. It's tough to make some of it sense sometimes when you get companies and publishers. The parameters I used, I went to their website. Yep. Can I get this game off of their website today? Could I hit the buy with shop button and get it delivered to my house?
All of mine fit that list as well.
What's that?
I said all of mine fit that list as well.
Yeah. I thought that was the easiest parameter to set around it. The other thing that I'll say, Doug, this was very tricky and challenging to get to 5. I have 10 on my list. Numbers 6 through 10, people could be shocked or outraged, especially with how glowingly we've talked about some of these games. So I might have 5 honorable mention, but I'll go ahead and
maybe we'll have some of those as crossover as well that we can throw in our honorable mentions too. So good, because I've got a couple as well.
Great. 5 for me was Game of the Week back in episode 128, and that is Acropolis. Acropolis, I've got too many, I got Tabzilla going on here, folks. Acropolis is designed by Jules Massad and art by Pauline Detraz, and it is a very, very cool tile placement game where you are building your city up, and the higher your levels go, the more points you're going to score. But you got to be able to spread out a little bit and trigger off multiple combos. I'd love to say this should be higher on my list. I just need more plays of it.
Sure.
You know, and it's one game that I don't enjoy playing as much on Board Game Arena because I find that the tile placement a little bit fiddly. I really enjoy playing this with people for the first time. It's a game I like to show people because once you talk about how the scoring works, and it's pretty simple, about once you get a third of the way through the initial play, people just get it, and it's off and running. Ranked overall on Board Game Geek at 448, and it's the 95th family game of all time.
Wow.
I will also proudly say it's one that we were right about. We called this game early on, and it was a Spiel des Jahres recommended. Shortly after, I'm not gonna say that we were a cause of that, Doug. You might be the Mensa Select winner cause, but
we may know
tons
some
of
people.
awards, and excited to see what the expansion does for this one that's coming out soon. So that's my number 5 is Acropolis.
All right. My number 5 is one that is near and dear to my heart. This is from Scorpion Masqué, published in 2022. And that's Flashback Zombie Kids. Earlier in the episode, Michael mentioned Zombie Kids Evolution. This is in the same universe, but it's not really an escape style game. It's more of a kind of puzzly journey in which you look at a card, and then there are different numbers on the card, and those numbers represent different viewpoints. So if Michael were on a card and it said 19 on it, I could look at card 19 and see exactly what Michael is looking at. And by seeing what everybody is looking at, you have to piece together the story of what happened. And as you go along, you unlock different contraptions for more secret stuff that you can find, or different ways to solve puzzles and uncover things. And I played this with my soon-to-be 10-year-old. That experience was so cool. And that's a sweet spot of age, is like 9 to probably 10 or 11, to really have them be in awe about what they're uncovering. And I let her run the main machine and kind of experience the game. And when you can see that awe and wonder while
awesome.
Your kids are playing a game, there's nothing better. And this game did such a good job with it that it's my number 5. And Flashback Zombie Kids. The designers are Baptiste Derez and Marc-Antoine Doyen. So Flashback
Awesome.
Zombie Kids.
That's great, Doug. It doesn't feel like Expeditions Around the World was all the way back in episode 191. It feels like we just
was
talked
that 2
about
years ago?
2 weeks ago. No, for me, it's the opposite. It feels like we just got done talking about this game. But Expeditions Around the World is my number 4, designed by Wolfgang Kramer. This one, I can't say that we were influencers on or early adopters on, because it was initially released in 1996. This is the opposite. Somebody at Hachette said, "Hey, you guys should check this out. We think it'd really work good for your group." And man, if you are homeschooling and game schooling, I do think Expeditions Around the World is completely relevant. I think there's a lot of tie-ins there in the way they use the map and how you get around, and just what's in that thin box. Fun game. We talked about it at length at 191. In case Doug's going to talk about it, I don't want to just keep ranting about it. Trying to read the body language here. Should I be done there? All right.
No, it's my number 4 as well.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
So it lines up perfect. I think what I really like about this game is that you have no player pieces. Everybody's using the same pieces on the board to try and get to. You have a bunch of cards in your hand of locations on the map that you want to visit. And that tension in this game, it's something that I talk about a lot. I love good under tension that's just below the surface. And in this one, it's got that level of, gosh, I really hope Michael puts an arrow closer to Egypt and we get, because I have a location to visit there or whatever. And there's like, no, he put it in the wrong direction. And then you have to try and figure out if there's a way that you can get back there, or do you need to pivot to another card in your. And so kind of constantly being aware of like, all right, now we're up in the North America region. Do I have any cards over there that I might be able to get to? And so I love that. Don't put it there. Don't put it there. Or put it. Oh, I think he's going to put it. Yes. And now you're like, I can visit 3 places in a single turn type of thing. So that's what I love about this one. My number 4 as well, Expeditions Around the World.
Great. Number 3 for me is In the Footsteps of Darwin.
My number 3 as well.
Well, do you want to take the initial so I don't just steal the thunder? In the Footsteps of Darwin is another one that we talked about early, and then when it came out for a lot of awards, we were feeling smart. And it's always nice to feel smart, even if you're just talking about board games. But In the Footsteps of Darwin is designed by Gregory Grard and Matthew Verdier. And it's from the sub-studio Sorry We Are French. 2024 Spiel des Jahres nominee and 2024 Mensa Select Award. So very cool game where you are taking tiles off of the board, and then that's going to trigger actions. At the same time, you're trying to build up your little 3x3 grid and move your ship around. One that we both have in our collection, one that I love. I'm going to turn it over to Doug because I have one more thing about the game I want to look up.
Yeah, so we talked about in episode 135, and it is a. I think what I like about this game is that you're doing the beagle around to collect the tiles that you add to your board, and it's got a level of set collection and a level of trying to fill rows and columns, but not in a way that if I get I kind of related to a game like Quadropolis where you're trying to fill in a map or fill in your board, but it doesn't have all of that spatial scoring of, well, if I get this next to this, I'll score more points. It doesn't necessarily have that. It's more on the set collection and filling up kind of columns and rows and things like that. So it's less about the spatial part and more about the set collection. And I really enjoy that aspect of it with the way that you select the tiles, which is similar to something of, wherever the beagle is at, you can pick one in that line or you can move. And so it's constantly going around this little board to select your tiles. It does a really good job. It's pretty streamlined.
I found what I was looking for, Doug, and I thought it was a typo. That's why I was like, I have to get in the forums. This can't be right. It's ages 8+, 6+, with a weight of 1.72 out of 5. And man, I'm telling you, there's a I don't want to say complexity in the term that we typically talk about it, but there is a strategy to the set collection and how you move the beagle and where you land where this can work for game groups and game nights and hobbyists as well. So I know there's a few Darwin games out there. There's a few Darwin games that I like to talk about. But for me, In the Footsteps of Darwin is so good that after we played it, after we reviewed it was about a year later when I ended up picking it up in a trade. I really enjoy this game and want to come back to it.
Yeah, and our website, which lists the games that we talk about, we have it in there as a 10+, which I think is closer to accurate.
It is accurate, Doug. Thanks for being accurate. Number 2 for me is one where I don't think we'll have crossover. We're back to me, right?
Yep.
Because I don't think you've played this one yet, and that is Icky. Icky is designed by Kuta Yamada. Incredible art and production. There's a few different versions, but specifically the one that Hachette released a few years back was 2023 Kennerspiel. So Hachette just taking nominations all over the place from the Spiel. But in Icky, you are rebuilding Tokyo set in the Edo era. And so you're going to hire artisans, set up the market. I'm going to try that description again, okay? I'm going to read the Board Game Geek flavor text here. But hire artisans, set them up in the market, and acquire prestige in feudal Japan. So what's going on is there's this track that you're going around this rondel, and you're hiring these artisans and you're leveling up the artisans and you're filling up different shops. But this is an era where fires happen, and fires can be catastrophic because they spread. So you have to be able to mitigate the fires that are going to potentially happen. There's an expansion that came out, the Akibono expansion. For me, just the base game of Iki is enough. There's so much that's happening in it. It's about a 60 to 90 minute adventure. One that plays really well at 4 players at the table because you have some simultaneous turns that are happening in it. And you can kind of see like, ooh, that person isn't set up for the fire. I am set up for the fire. So there are, and this is going to sound terrible to say, but there's times in the game where you're kind of hoping that the fire happens and it happens over at their shop because
now.
I'm good on my shop and I'm set up to score on the inside of the shop here. So really awesome game, and one that I'm glad that Hachette brought to a wider audience with that beautiful version that came out a few years back.
Cool. Awesome. My number 2, Michael already mentioned, that's Acropolis from Gigamic. Gigamic. And what I really like about this is the thing that I like about a lot of games that have something similar is that constant struggle of the way that the scoring works is, do I make this area bigger or do I get the multiplier tile?
Yeah.
And trying to figure out when to grab either of those and not knowing when more of them may come out, and that selection process of, all right, I'm going to, in this game you can, there's a row of tiles that you can select, and if you want to go far, the first one's free, but if you want to go farther, you can put concrete or stone on it and take one farther down. And that thing was like, I better take that now. Or seeing a tile that's like, well, I can make this bigger, but I'm not multiplying it by anything. And that kind of decision-making process and that sort of drafting element is what I really enjoy about Acropolis, which it is why it is my number 2.
Awesome. Number 1 for me was our game of the week last week. So Nidavellir, okay, 2020, Serge Leggett. And, 5 years in, hard to believe it's a 2020 release, and I feel like I am just finding a game group to play it with, but also playing it a lot on Board Game Arena with people around the world, sometimes who are very good at it. But in Nidavellir, you're going into a tavern and you're recruiting an army, but you can't just load up on the same type of soldiers because you're not going to get as many points as if you spread them out. Once you've recruited one person from each army, you're able to go and recruit a specialist and bring them in. So it's just so many good things happening in there with the bidding for who's going to get to go into the tavern first and improving your economy. We talked about it last week. I'll send it over to Doug because he said me too as well for his first. So go ahead. I don't want to just say all the great things about it. But
no, it's just a phenomenal game. We go into great detail on last week's episode, or episode 207. Yeah, that's last week's episode.
Yep.
I'm glad that I discovered this one, and I think we talked a little bit about it last week, is that I think the presentation or the way that this game was kind of presented out to the gamer universe was not necessarily the way that I would have presented it out, and a game that really fits in my wheelhouse well of what I enjoy in games, set collection and kind of bidding and drafting and all of those components that are in there that I really enjoy, that I wish I had discovered sooner, because I think it would have been in my collection for a long time.
And this is just a disclaimer. I had to pay just like John Q. Public would pay, but if Nidavellir is a game that you love, Hachette right now does have the Upgrade Royal Treasure on it, and I mean, you cannot return it because there were obviously some production issues, and some of them are quote unquote dinged. But for me, if you're looking to deluxify, that little $35 upgrade that came with the free shipping and my set was just fine. I love those premium chips and the stacking. So I'm glad that Hachette has supported this one the way that they have and continues to bring some of those things out to cons. And there's 2 different expansions as well. One I haven't even cracked yet because I'm still, discovering Thingavali, or I haven't quite gotten to Idaval yet. So it's a cool little game.
All right, so some games that just kind of missed the list for me are Now, Zombie Kids Evolution, which we talked about in episode 44. Now we talked about in 203. And then the last one for me is Decrypto, which is a great word deduction team game.
I have 2 more. I just could, if it was a high 6, Sky Team would have been on there.
Sure.
But I just don't I haven't played it with my wife. I think, this is an award-winning game, that couples game, this, that, the other thing. I've played it with my buddies, and I've played it online. It's gotten so much coverage. You can go out and find out all about it all over the place. And then another game from Hachette that I really like, but just didn't quite land fully for me, but I think it's worth mentioning, is Miller Zoo. Cool little cooperative if you're looking at zoo building games, and so. Sure.
All right, so that is our list. People probably shocked that Sky Team's not on there. I haven't played it. I have a copy somewhere, just haven't.
You haven't gotten to that one yet at all?
No, okay. I haven't played it at all.
Yeah, I think you're really going to like it.
So let us know which ones we missed, if there are other ones that you guys enjoy as well. Subscribe to the podcast and follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. And if you like what we're doing, leave a review on whatever platform you listen to us. We'd really appreciate that.
5 star.
Next week we have our Gamma recap special, so hopefully we'll have some good information after my journeys to Louisville, and we'll keep you posted there. So thank you for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.